Welcome to another episode of Nature of Sovereignty. Today's episode is quite a rip. We did over about an hour. The actual conversation went for like an hour and 30, hour and 40, but definitely had to cut it. But that's what happens when you talk to such an insightful and deep thinker as of Robert Breedlove. It was an absolute pleasure. In this episode, we talked about philosophers that has informed his approach to the world, the difference between Eastern versus Western philosophy, and setting your moral aim as high as possible. Lessons learned from African American history on the corruption of money, why property rights is the most fundamental human right, why the central bank system is an invisible form of slavery, along as many book recommendations, the difference between the angel versus the animal, and also how hip hop can be potentially a massive influence on adoption. This is a very special one for me because the first ever piece of Bitcoin content I ever released uh, earlier this year was an article, and I sent it out to a bunch of people in the industry. And the first guy to get back to me was Robert Breedlove. He read it, had comments, and said, "Man, this is quite all right." He was like, "Keep going, keep moving." And for a guy who's starting out in this space to get a thumbs up and approval from such a guy like that right off the rip and be the first one, um, you got to stick around. So he was gracious enough to sit down with me, and we just had a conversation on things that we enjoy. So it kind of meanders and divots and pivots throughout. But if you enjoy the mind of Robert Breedlove, you enjoy this episode. Well, today is an absolute pleasure. I have the host of the What is Money podcast and also the founder and CEO of Parallax Digital, Robert Breedlove. Pleasure to have you on.
Hey, man. Glad to be here. Appreciate
it. Thank you. Thank you. I look at you as a philosopher, right? The Bitcoin philosopher and a deep thinker. So I'm curious to find out, do you have any philosophers that you follow that may have inspired the way that you approach thoughts and inspired your thinking?
Well, Ian, thank you for that. That people have started to call me that, the Bitcoin philosopher, and they're very big shoes to fill. The one thing I think is funny is when you come on one of these shows and they say the self-proclaimed philosopher, and I always have to pause and I'm like, whoa. Wow. I don't think anyone can self-proclaim themselves to be a philosopher. I mean, maybe you can if you go and get a philosophy degree. It's funny, I've always been kind of the philosophical bent my entire life. My friends that, have known me for a long time will make fun of me. Like, you're just not capable of small talk. It's always, talking about the big picture, the big ideas, whatever it may be. So I guess I kind of have a bit of a natural predilection towards it. And then I also, I guess going down, I've told the story before. When I was a kid, I was just really curious. So my first deep dive was in astrophysics, actually. I was always curious about space, the stars, the cosmos. And so once I could really read on my own, I started reading pretty aggressively. I guess this is around the age of 11, 12. Started to read a lot of work by like Stephen Hawking, Brian Greene, all these astrophysicists. And it's just far out, it's astrophysics. It's the deepest knowledge of the universe, basically. So that kind of laid the groundwork for me for a couple of things. One, to just always ask why. Like, I'm always trying to get to the bottom of something, And I feel like that's the only way I can really understand it. I can't just accept an answer at face value. I need to get to bedrock when I'm trying to think through something. And so that laid a very first principles pursuing foundation for me, where I always wanted to get to the bottom of something. And then it also just got me into reading. I developed this habit of reading often, but always really young in life, and kept it up for a long time. So to get back to your original question, like which philosophers have been influential on me, I coming up earlier in life, I was really captivated by Eastern philosophy. So this was Sun Tzu, Musashi, um, reading like the Tao Te Ching. I got into Taoism. I would say it was the one that I found particularly interesting. And the Taoist philosophy, I don't know, it's not a religion. I think it's more of a philosophy, and that it's just a way to approach life. There's not so much organization or institution built up around it. But for me, it seemed to be a way of thinking and living that accords with nature. So they're all about going with the flow of nature versus trying to resist, or fight it. So that was impactful. I'd also say that Stoicism was a big influence on me. Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus, a lot of their writings, I think they're just great mental tools for dealing with life. And it can teach you to be, I just think it makes you more resilient, I guess. Life is tough. There's a lot of things, a lot of ups and downs, a lot of things to maintain. I mean, if you're trying to live life properly, it's a really big task. You're trying to stay healthy, you're trying to stay smart, you're trying to stay wealthy or get wealthy, or whatever the thing is. It's a lot to maintain. And then most recently, which I have to thank for Bitcoin, first of all, getting into the Bitcoin rabbit hole was just like throwing fuel on whatever philosophical fire I had in my heart. I was already curious and asking questions and looking into things, but Bitcoin has just completely accelerated that for me. And one of the individuals I discovered through Bitcoin actually is Jordan Peterson.
Yeah. 12 Rules of Life.
Yeah.
Lots of meaning, all of that. Yeah.
Yes. So I think he's one of the greatest, and he's a very controversial figure. I would call him a philosopher. I don't know if he's self-proclaimed, whatever, but I would say that he is one of the most compelling living lecturers I've ever heard. I think the most compelling lecturer I've ever heard. And his ability to synthesize multiple domains, and he ties it all back into Christianity. That pulled me back into kind of the Judeo-Christian, philosophy, mythology, religion, if you will. I grew up Christian in Tennessee, but I never really paid a lot of attention to it in my young adult life. But thanks to Jordan, I've kind of walked back that direction. And there's just so much there. There's so much there, where all of Western civilization is built on top of Christianity, pretty much. Yeah. So it's even things, it doesn't matter, like people running around saying, I don't believe in God or whatever. It's like, if you believe in private property rights, that has its basis in Christianity in a lot of ways. Respect for the sovereignty of the individual, frankly, above the state. So long-winded answer to your question, but I would say, and then Peterson's introduced me to a lot of his influences, and I've just been branching out ever since. My reading list has exploded. I'm trying to read like 50 pages a day to try to knock down a book a week to try to put a dent in it. But it's tall order. So
I might have to get a couple of those recommendations. But wow, there's so many ways we can branch off of that. Well, the quick sort of thing about religion, this is not a spiritual show, but when you said you started out with Eastern philosophy, I've always broke it down from like Eastern to Western. Is Western sort of supposes that you internally are unclean, and you have to find you have to be cleansed from something external from you, like Jesus Christ, or the finding salvation is something outside of you. that you must accept within. Well, the Buddhist philosophy, Eastern philosophies, says that you are that clean being. You are born clean. You're born with that light. But over time, just living life, that's when the dirt sort of sullies that spirit. So the darkness, the sullying comes from outside of yourself. So it's finding ways to repurify or return back to that pure essence. So, and I like to, I don't know, just for me and how I conceptualize things, I lean a little more to that end. I like to.
No, that's interesting way to look at it. I've never heard it put quite like that. What you said there at the end reminded me of meditation. Actually, meditation means to return to the center. And in Taoism, they talk about this too, where kind of the purpose of life is to rediscover that innocence and sparkle of being a child, where you just have this like sense of wonder about the world. People like Alan Watts, I don't know if you like read about him.
Psychedelics, yeah.
Well, he I don't know his whole story, but I've read a few of his books. But people describe him like late in life as he actually achieved that. He was just this very happy-go-lucky guy. He's very smart, but he's very he's childlike in a way, but in a good, not, it's not like you've gotten so old you've become a child again. It's like you're still an adult. You have all your faculties, your wisdom, your intelligence, but you've managed to break through and have this really like wholesome, innocent attitude towards the world and towards others. So it's kind of like a returning to center concept, where you've gone out as an exploratory agent in the world and you've returned back to the center of just being as you described, the pure, clean, polished soul in Buddhism. I'm not sure the original question. I lost track of that.
Yeah, no, we was just talking about the different philosophies, the Eastern and Western. But
yes. So you were describing Western as being something like outside of yourself, where you have this salvation, whereas Eastern's more about internal. I never put that way, but the thing that resonates with me about Christ specifically, and again, this is a Peterson / Carl Jung interpretation, but they view Christ as the ultimate or archetypal moral consciousness.
Right. The perfect person, right?
Yeah, the perfect, like, he met, betrayal with love, and, sin with sacrifice, all of these things. He's just perfectly compassionate and whole.
The perfect model, I should say.
Yeah. So it's something we should like aspire to be morally or consciously. And this isn't just some frou-frou, like, oh yeah, be kind thing. It's like, no, Carl Jung was a clinical psychologist. And he said setting your moral aim as high as possible was a viable alternative to his work. So you don't need to come in here and see me once a week and do all these things. If you take it seriously and really set your moral aim as high as you can and work towards it, your life will reassemble itself in a way that heals you of your psychological trauma. So there's a very practical aspect to this Christ consciousness concept. And I think that's where I'm at with Christianity. It's like, it is internal for me. I'm not looking to find God outside of myself and, get into the pearly gates or any of that, whatever guy in the sky thing. It's like, it is very internal. And I guess I've combined it a bit too with my meditation practice and my, the Taoist. I haven't read much Buddhism, as I said, but the perspective on nature through Taoism, I think I've incorporated a lot of that into my Christian views. And I love Peterson's answer to this question, by the way, is people ask him if he believes in God.
I live as if he exists. Yeah.
He says, I don't believe in God, but I act as if he exists.
Right.
And this gets me into Austrian economics, frankly. It's like, it's all about action. Like every action you take, by definition, is an expression of your internal value hierarchy. What values you have. Whatever action you're taking in a moment means you're expressing the preference for that you're valuing that course of action above all others by definition, because you're sacrificing all of the other courses of action, all the other opportunity costs in the world to take a single course of action. So I love that answer, because it's, for me, it highlights the primacy of action above cognitive belief. That what you actually do is what defines you, not what you semantically proclaim. Like, oh, I believe in this God, or I believe in this God, let's go fight about it. Like, that's all irrelevant. It's really the actions you take moment to moment, day to day.
Right. I mean, as we sort of laid out that foundation of principles and values, I'm curious to see like what informed your earliest moments of skepticism, let's say, towards centralized power. What form did it come in?
Well, this is another area where God, I guess, gave me a predisposition towards it. And I say that loosely because I know, again, it's not a guy in the sky. It's just whatever that creative principle is. My report cards as a kid were usually something along the lines of, Robert's a great student. He asks a lot of good questions. He's, a really smart kid. However, he does not listen to me at all on the playground. He's always stirring up
notes.
Yeah. So it was like
the same thing.
It was always like kind of a barbell assessment, I guess. They really liked me in the classroom and didn't like me on the playground. And so I've always had this healthy, I don't know, skepticism of authority. Just always been very fiercely independent. Oh, and this is another thing I can thank Peterson for. I recently took his personality test.
Oh, okay.
The big 5 personality traits, and I got an
Ocean, right?
Ocean, that's right. That's right. Openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness,
and neuroticism. Yeah.
I got a 1% on agreeableness.
Oh no!
So I am 100 people in a room. I'm more disagreeable than 98 of them. So I guess that's part of the skepticism.
That's very Bitcoin of you. That is the Bitcoin community. Very disagreeable.
Very disagreeable.
Yeah.
So I guess it was sort of hardwired into me. And then in this is pre-Bitcoin, actually. This is 2004, 2005 range, which I'm young at this time. I'm probably 18, 19. I started going down the central banking rabbit hole. I told you I started reading when I was young. I started reading The Economist magazine pretty religiously when I was like somewhere in that range, 16 to 18. So I was trying to like figure out what's going on in the world. Like, what is
reading Sports Illustrated at that time? That was the magazines I was watching, and the Source magazine.
Yeah, I was just trying, because I don't know.
That's awesome.
I had this dim apprehension of wanting to be a businessman when I went to college, but I didn't even know what that meant. I just wanted to I didn't know what anything was. So
have a suit and a tie, huh?
Yeah, suit and tie, send faxes, carry a briefcase, pick up checks. Who knows? Right. But I wanted to understand the machine, the macroeconomic machine. And so I just started reading things. And when I found the Economist magazine, I found it to be very challenging to read. I was impressed with the writing. The writers are really kind of highbrow. So I was magnetized towards that. But it always left me, I always felt like something was missing, like they described, it's kind of the way I look at it now is kind of a statist newspaper. They describe the policies and whatnot that leaders need to take to fix the economy, but they're not, it talks about free market principles, but it doesn't prioritize them. It sort of looks at the world through the lens of, its current structure, which makes sense. But anyways, I discovered eventually G. Edward Griffin's work, Creature from Jekyll Island. And again, this is pre-Bitcoin's like 2005 probably. That book is about the inception of the Federal Reserve and the evil of central banking more generally. Um, and that was kind of the bottom of that rabbit hole for me. I was like, holy shit, everything that's wrong in the world, socioeconomically, well, definitely economically. I think it also infects the social domain. Not everything, but a large degree of it is rooted in central banking, the corruption of the money. And I felt very, distraught about this. And I was telling friends and family, I even bought them all a book for Christmas about it. It was like a condensed version or an abridged version of Creature from Jekyll Island. And a few friends and family members that read it were like, okay, I believe you. I see what you're saying. This is bad, but what can we do about it? And I always talk about this. I had this feeling of just defeat in a way, or disempowerment, because I didn't have an answer. I was like, I thought we could just equip ourselves with knowledge and somehow resolve this problem, but there was no actual answer to central banking at all. There's nothing anyone could do. Fast forward several years, I didn't, I saw Bitcoin in 14, like I was buying it and taking it, like I bought it, I was reading about it, but not enough, I guess. I don't know. I just didn't go down the rabbit hole. I didn't get to the edge of the rabbit hole to understand that it was the answer to central banking until 2016, 2017. And that's one thing I do kick myself about. It's like I was standing right there, I owned the asset, but for whatever reason, I didn't read the right thing. Or had I discovered Szabo, Nick Szabo back in 2014, I think that would have accelerated me down the rabbit hole more quickly, but I just didn't get deep into it until 16, 17. So
I mean, that's such a foreign concept, right? Like Bitcoin itself, and it takes in so many different disciplines: social, cultural,
yeah,
political, economic, philosophical. It's so many different disciplines all into one, and we never had a technology or tool that would let us peacefully remove ourselves from
yes,
central control, right?
that's
There
right.
has always been a central authority, a central rule, and that has just been embedded in us as humans for since like lords and serfs, right?
Right,
So
right.
so this
Well,
might be, yeah.
and embedded even more deeply than that, Peterson talks about the lobsters, that social hierarchies are intrinsic to social creatures. Actually, we organize ourselves into hierarchies to deal with nature. The problems come with how we maintain that hierarchy, right? Is it based on competence or is it based on coercion? And to your point, money has just always been, it's the primary mechanism to control humans with. And we have historically had money always based on coercion, more or less. And so, yeah, but I guess with Bitcoin, I didn't, the gap in my understanding was Austrian economics. I had not discovered Austrian economics until actually Safeteen's book got me into that. And I think that's the key piece, is you have to understand, like I knew gold was money, gold and silver were money, central banking was bad, but I needed to understand the why of gold and silver being money. A lot of these books stop short and they just tell you that's the way it's been for thousands of years. People have used gold and silver as money for thousands of years, but they don't get into the properties of money, right? Why gold was selected on the market. And I think you have to answer that why before you can perceive the value proposition of Bitcoin properly.
Right. And so, I mean, the question was like, what informs your skepticism? And as in the Black community, that mistrust is more innate.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
it's through lived experience. Is less of a theory or
Mm-hmm.
something that you can read in the book. This is stories and that's passed down. And I mean, one of the biggest ones was when I was reading about the Freedmen's Savings Bank, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think 1865, and it was the first sort of government bank, and it was enacted because after emancipated slaves,
Mhm.
they were free. They needed to put their money somewhere.
Right.
So they created, this bank, and within 10 years, emancipated slaves put in around $75 million. It would
Yeah.
be $5 billion in today's money, right?
Right.
And obviously the the board wasn't anybody black. It was all white
Right.
board
Right.
members,
Right.
and they took that money and put it in high risk investments on like railroad speculations and
They
other different
stole
business.
it basically. Yeah. They
Yeah,
squandered it.
complete and
Yeah.
just straight plunder.
Yeah.
And in 10 years, $5 billion of African American wealth, emancipated slaves, were just
Yeah.
wiped out,
Yeah.
right? And that shows like what when they have the levers, can pull the levers and
Yes.
can dictate the issuance of the monetary system and monetary
Yes.
policy. There's
They
no
control you.
options. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's full control.
And I get like my blood boils a little bit when I hear stories like that. I don't know if you've read my piece, Masters and Slaves of Money, but it's this corruption of money is like, it runs so deep, man. Like it's the reason, it's a lot, I don't want to say the reason, it's a large contributor to the start of the transatlantic slave trade. The fact that there was Europeans were counterfeiting money effectively and going into Africa and
The
usurping wealth.
agri beads, right?
Yeah, the agri beads.
Yeah.
And so it's not like and people will get very technical on this. Well, they will say, well, technically the Europeans could produce the money more cheaply and they could just pass it off for this thing in Africa. But I'm like, it was done deceivingly, because even Africans knew they could tell the beads apart. So it became this cat and mouse game where Europeans would try to make them a little bit more, high quality counterfeit, if you will, to make it harder for them to tell. And this just points to where humanity always destroys himself. It's like when it comes to the money, we've just been fighting over controlling the money or hoarding the money or being able to, it goes hand in hand with territoriality in a way. And this is another thing that I argue is, I think, so organisms are territorial, most social organisms, right? We want to control an area, so that's ours. That's why birds sing, by the way, in trees. We think they're just out singing and it's pretty. No, they're like, this is my branch,
Yeah.
back off, so territoriality it's almost universal.
Dogs peeing on trees and stuff.
Dogs peeing on trees, all that stuff.
Yeah.
For humans, it's property rights. Literally, it's you own the basic property is self ownership. You own your own time. You can now take that time and talent, everything that you have, all the faculties you have, and you can infuse them with nature, right? So you can go plant a farm or build a house or whatever the thing is. And so long as that relationship, that's how human beings are expressing their territoriality. So I'm creating my own territory, my own livable territory through my actions. And then the brilliant innovation of capitalism, if you will, is that we needed a socioeconomic structure that honored and recognized the relationship between individual and property that could not be violated, right? So I can go out and build a house or plant a farm, and then I'm free to trade those things with other self-owned people that have done the same things. Maybe they built a fishing boat or nets or whatever, and we can trade. And once we start trading, that's how we become more wealthy. That is the division of labor that creates this lap of luxury that we enjoy today. It's all born from capitalism. And money is just the highest property right. It's the meta property right. It's very psychologically significant, let's say.
Yeah.
And my argument would be, is because it's getting to the base level of our spine. We're like, it's the property rights inherent to all animals. This has been with us for hundreds and hundreds of millions of years. We've just found a new way to implement it. And so the history of corrupting money, because it's this very basic animalistic impulse, corrupting money to control others it's the dark history of mankind, frankly. It's like every state, every monopoly on violence has always controlled the money. monetary technologies have been diluted and counterfeited, to leading to the enslavement of others. It's just so, once you start looking at it through that lens, it makes Bitcoin appear like an absolute necessity. It's like we
Absolutely.
need a money that we cannot fuck up. Basically, we cannot corrupt and control and weaponize against one another and manipulate and fight over. Well, you could also say that World War II, you're fighting over the gold. The reason the United States rewrote the rules of the banking order immediately after World War II is because all the gold is here. All the gold ended up in North America. Not all, the vast majority of gold ended up in North America. So we were able to step in and rewrite the banking rules because we were the state or the gang with the most gold. And he who has the gold makes the rules. So is this money that is vulnerable to violence, that can be physically confiscated. Gold has incentivized us to be violent towards one another, to do whatever it takes to get the gold. And now, I mean, I hope this is not naive optimism, and I have great hopes for the digital age, that Bitcoin gives us this form of money that just disincentivizes violence. And so we can self-organize in a way that is more peaceful, cooperative, productive, wealth generating. You know, I think post Bitcoin, we're all just much richer. And when violence doesn't pay as well as it used to, you would expect there to be much lower levels of aggregate violence in the world.
And, that makes sense for us in our position here. But from the perspective of those who have a monopoly on violence, how do you ultimately incentivize them to shift to a system that effectively takes away absolute power from their hands? Like,
This
is it
is the
something
beauty
like,
of it. The way I see it now is that they're compelled equally by self-interest. And by it's not, we often think, this is another, we have to be careful here with our thinking, that a lot of people want to say there's like us and the elites or some other category of the 1%, or there's not one indivisible group of elites or 1%, right? There's this whole constellation of interconnected relationships and agendas and interests, and they're constantly competing for resources and moving around. We're humans, right? We're like, how many different groups are you a part of? You have friends that were probably friends 10 years ago, and you've moved into different friend groups, different businesses. Like, we're constantly moving between these social spheres. So I think we have to think at the individual level, right? It's very tempting to think at the group level, but when it comes to Bitcoin, it's all about the individual, right? The individual owns this asset. And so I think even those directly benefiting from the fiat currency printing press today, that are drinking straight out of the spigot, inflation is going to be damaging society. We know that. It's going to create more and more turbulence, more and more uncertainty. And if Bitcoin continues to do what it's been doing flawlessly for 12 years, it's going to increase the price of Bitcoin, because Bitcoin's just an insurance policy on excess fiat currency supply inflation. So the more dollars they print, the more valuable it becomes. So I think even these actors benefiting directly from fiat, they're going to be forced to buy Bitcoin over time based on their own individual self-interest, if nothing more than as an insurance policy against its success. So you're going to have individuals. The printing of money pushes you out further along the risk curve, right? So if you are an individual homeowner, so you're going into retirement, you typically want to own a bunch of low-risk government bonds, for instance. Well, government bonds yield, say it's a 1% bond if you're lucky. A lot of them are negative or zero.
not beating inflation?
Inflation is 15%, so you've got a negative real yield of 14%. Well, bonds don't work for me anymore, so now I need to go into equities, or I need to go into junk bonds, or I need to go in something riskier. And at the very end of that risk spectrum today is Bitcoin, right? It's like a 70 or 80 vol asset. Inflation's pushing everyone into it. These are all market actors, individuals, corporations, ultimately, I think nation states, sovereign wealth funds. As they buy it, it changes first of all, the more market capitalization goes into Bitcoin, the less relevant fiat is. So the more fiat they have to print to have a diminishing return, a diminishing economic return. And I think that the game theory of Bitcoin just kind of dissolves the power structures under which we exist today. Is how I see it. It's just because the other thing is, as people acquire this, it actually changes your perceptions. If I go from, say, I'm just a diehard central bank ideologue, I believe central banking is the only thing that will ever work. I love central banking. I wear a T-shirt every day that says I love it. You still end up buying some of this thing. It's like if you own Facebook and there's some upstart social media company that's just exploding in market cap and users, eventually you're going to buy some equity in that company or try to buy the whole company, as Facebook did with Instagram, for instance, to protect and preserve your economic moat. Central banking will have to do the same, right? They will have to buy some of this asset that's an existential threat to their business model. Whether they hate it or love it doesn't matter. You just pragmatically have to buy some to protect yourself. And I think this just triggers a process of Bitcoin consuming all the monetary premium over time. And when it consumes all the monetary premium, then inflation goes to zero, effectively. You'd say currencies will fail. National government currencies will fail. If I then look at the United States in 2020, we printed $4 trillion, we taxed $4 trillion. So half of the United States government's revenue model on a Bitcoin standard is gone. They've lost 50% of their revenues overnight. And then the other 50%, the direct taxation, it's like, okay, well, now everyone's holding their money in this digital cash that's increasingly can be anonymized, increasingly easy to anonymize, let's say. So I think it puts downward pressure on direct taxation as well. And I just think this gets into that sovereign individual thesis of where Bitcoin is bankrupting the nation state over time and shrinking government. And it's all driven by self-interest. So to your original question, like how do we get the powers that be to let go of the fiat currency printing press? I don't think we get them really to let go. I think the spigot just runs out of water. It's like they're going to keep printing and printing and printing, but eventually the fiat coming out of that thing is just not going to be worth anything. Right. Everyone's going to hold their money in Bitcoin, and a parallel digital non-state economy develops alongside it.
What you're speaking to is the law of accelerating issuance and depreciation, right? So basically, as a hegemon, the U.S. government is an economic hegemon. Like the more money you print, the more money you have to print.
That's right.
And we're caught in the Triffin's dilemma of like, okay, the world is using, I think, like 70% of all contracts is done in the U.S. dollar, somewhere around there. So the world needs U.S. dollars for liquidity. So we have to keep on printing. But as we do this, we're printing more money. We're depreciating the value of our money domestically for our people. That hard situation where it's like, okay, we need more money in system for the world to continue, but we're continuing to devalue what we already own. So it's a way to opt out of that spiral, that downward spiral.
And I think this fits into the grander arc of humanity, and that our systems of sovereignty have been decentralizing over time. Right, we've gone from the pharaohs of ancient Egypt, a couple of pharaohs fully sovereign, everyone else pretty much a slave. Like you do what the god king says. The end. Fast forward to maybe monarchy. There's a great many more monarchs than there were pharaohs, but then everyone below them was effectively a slave. So you have a lot more. You have kind of a mid-tier sovereign. And then today in Western civilization, we have representative democracy, where it's supposed to be every individual is sovereign. We're electing officials to represent us. That's the idea. It's not quite true. But I think Bitcoin is just like the next leap forward, where you're actually giving every individual full sovereignty over their time, money, property, territory, if you will, if you want to look at it in a biological sense, and empowering them to self-organize in a way that best suits the collective self-interest of the group versus anyone being able to bend and twist the rules to favor themselves and at the expense of everyone else, which is what central banking is. And it also plays into the grand human arc of slavery, right? We have, throughout history, slavery has been the norm, pretty much. Like even in ancient Rome, I forget the numbers. I want to say it was a city of 400,000 people and 90,000 were free. So 310,000 slaves serving 90,000 people all in one city. So it was the norm. Like you interact with slaves every day. It's like having a car or shoes or anything. People were property flat out. And it was socially
accepted. It's a natural instinct. I want to have free labor.
Exactly. Know what I'm saying?
Like, yeah, I want labor, but for free. I don't want to pay for it.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's this whole, I try to talk about this too, where it's the human proclivity to try and get something for nothing. Mm-hmm. Now,
better way of saying it. Yeah.
It can be a great thing, right? If you're an innovator, basically an innovator is someone that's lazy and smart. They're figuring out a better, cheaper, faster way to do something. So you can do something morally, right? You can innovate a new tool or something that helps you accomplish greater aims with less efforts. That's great. That's what advances civilization. But if you cross that line in your heart from moral to immoral, or from a freely adopted action to something that's compelled, where you're compelling slave labor, for instance, to serve you, to get something for nothing, that's where it's bad. So it's like, we're all trying to get something for nothing. So then it comes down to the morality of our decision. Is it free or is it unfree? And central banking, in my opinion, will be regarded historically as the latest or the most recent, hopefully the last institution of slavery. Right? We just kept, again, we're decentralizing sovereignty over time. So slavery is getting less and less obvious, less and less necessary too, as we've become more wealthy. Right? So as capitalism has created more wealth in the world, we've needed direct slavery less and less and less, or not needed. The incentive for direct slavery has decreased along with the increase of wealth in capitalism.
We became more productive. Technology has increased, gotten better, more efficient. There's less need for, slavery.
Yes. Mm-hmm. But central banking, in my opinion, is just it's invisible slavery in a way, because they're stealing a little bit of time and property from everyone, right? Ideally, just 2% per year, quote unquote. But as we see, it accelerates in times of crisis. And I just think that the problem is because it's less visible or invisible, even like most people, what I just said, I think most people would think I was absolutely crazy. Like, what do you mean the dollar is slavery? That doesn't make any sense. But it's like, once you understand the mechanics of the monetary system, it's like your time is being siphoned through that dollar. So you go out and work 40 hours a week, 2,000 hours a year, you're paying Uncle Sam directly. Your direct tax bill is probably 40% of that. So you're sending him a check for 40% of it. And then guess what else? He's also printing money, printing the token that you sacrifice your time for. There's a group of individuals printing it with no effort. So they are diluting your dollars as well to call it to the tune of another 40%, roughly. I don't know what else you can possibly call that. Is, invisible theft of property, time. How is that not slavery? It's just less obvious is all it is. But because it's less obvious, it's done at a much larger scale. And I try to bear that out in the numbers in Masters and Slaves of Money. But so that's where I'm impassioned to spread the word and hopefully help dissolve this false ideology that's running the world right now.
Right. And I think, and that's a similar passion of mine. And I'm more directed to, my community, because we know how coercive central power can be, right?
Mhm.
We know how relentless and unforgiving they can be. And it's so interesting when I talk to other Black people and just like different like meetups about Bitcoin and how our Clubhouse exploded over 100K, 120K members. Is It's so innate, like the light bulb goes off
Mhm.
quicker than I would say that when I talk to other people, because
Yeah.
it's through lived experience. Even obviously I didn't live through the Freeman Savings Bank, or the Tulsa massacre or anything like
Yeah.
that, but there's always been a sense of when Black people in particular uh, get too high or do too good, or they're progressing too much, there's always going to be a force that sort of cuts it down. Like, okay, all
Right.
right, you guys are moving too quickly. You're
Right.
going, like, let's find a way to
Yeah.
manipulate this system outside of their favor, right? And
Yes.
then we start from square one again.
Yes.
But that's not specific to Black people, but there's all people who don't fit into that structure or that
Mhm.
favored, you could say, group or class or a group of people. That can be any demographic, right?
Mhm.
And we are slowly learning how that we're all living underneath that system of
Yes.
the unfavored group,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
there's only a few of those people who it's working in favor of. So to have a technology where you can peacefully opt out of that and be able to take responsibility over your own finances, independence over your own finances,
Yes.
and build generational wealth. Um, Once again, that light bulb clicks. And so I appreciate having people like you, the deep thinkers of the industry, and I'm trying to do what I can for just more education and illumination,
Yes.
to that we don't have to live under
Right.
this oppressive system anymore. Like we have options now.
Yes.
Um, and so I appreciate the stuff that you do. Now, as a kind of like a wrap up in a sense, I told you I want to know about your books, man. Like, because I need to be reading what you read, because you got the goods, you got the gems. So what is the last book that you recommended to a friend? And also, is there a book that you find yourself continuously rereading or going back to?
Well, I will, I'm going to try to get, I'm working on a number of things right now, but I'll try to get a book list put up at some point. So I'll put up things that I've read and whatnot. But so a book that I've recommend a lot of books, but on the theme today, there's a great book on Mises.org, which is Mises.org. It's called Honest Money by Gary North. It's a
Okay.
short book. It's more like a monograph. So it's 100 pages, but you can read it in probably an hour or two. Like it's not a lot of words per
Quick
page.
read. Okay.
It's free PDF. You could also get it on Amazon if you want, but he is explaining, and don't let this throw you, like he's explaining the monetary system through a Christian moral perspective. Doesn't matter if you're Christian though, frankly. Like he cites a couple of Bible verses here and there, but he's brilliant in his brevity and eloquence. Like it's very short sentences, very easy to understand, very common sense, but he's making very sophisticated arguments. And it all comes from first principles. He doesn't presuppose that you have any knowledge about money or banking or finance or anything. So I think it's just a great introduction to money, banking, the moral implications of it. It's written in a way that's just enjoyable. I've read the book probably 3 times. I just think he's a great writer. And it's just a great entry point for people. I mean, you can literally know zero about all the things we've talked about today. And I think you'll get a lot of takeaways from just spending a couple hours on that book. One that I found myself rereading, I've reread a lot too. So this book is extremely hard. Human Action by Mises.
Okay.
It is the Bible, if you will, of Austrian economics. It's very difficult. The way he writes, he's a German speaker, native, so it's written in like a Germanic kind of English. He uses a lot of hard words. He has long, complicated sentences. It's very hard to read, but
If we're looking for a challenge, this is what we
yeah,
want.
I
Human
would put that
action.
one way out on the challenge end.
Okay.
This is way off topic, but one that I reread years ago, I used to read a lot, was called The Seven Spiritual Laws of Success. And this is Deepak Chopra. I know he's a kind of controversial figure too. I don't know a lot about the guy. I just like the book. I think it's really good. It's just good. I don't know. Check it out. Another one that I've reread a lot, there's one I found recently. This is kind of a Taoist book, actually. It was recommended to me by a friend. The Master's Secret Whispers, I believe is what it's called. It's another very short book. Probably read it in an hour. And it's just this dialogue between master and student. So the student will come to the master and he'll ask him a certain question, and the master will lay out some answers. And I think it's just an excellent book about developing this inner space between yourself, your deeper self, and the world around you, like the circumstances you're going on. And this is kind of like what Viktor Frankl talked about as the final human freedom, right? The one that no one could take away, was that gap between your circumstances and your response. Like you always control that. No matter what situation you're facing outside of yourself, it does not control your deeper self. You always have choice between there. And no one can take that away. Literally. I mean, you can be physically tortured out of your mind, and I'm sure everyone maybe has a breaking point somewhere in there, but you have that choice ultimately.
How you respond. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good one. That's one I'm probably going to look into.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, because we all have that internal apprentice and master, the lower self and higher self.
Yes.
You
I
know.
like to call them the angel and the animal,
Okay.
where the angel is your higher principled, ideological, thinking, moral self, but there's also the animal, which is your biology, your ego, your meat suit. And it's been difficult finding a balance, because you can't just be the angel, you can't just be the animal. Clearly, it's almost like the animal empowers the angel in a way. I think it kind of like maybe like riding a horse or something. Like it gives you more
The
power.
energetic force. Yeah, the
So what I
energetic
do,
force.
the energetic force. So what I do recently, because I've been both directions throughout life, but more recently I was way too angel, like trying to just read and meditate and do everything perfect.
Yeah.
And I stopped. This sounds funny, but I stopped listening to heavy, hard music at the gym. Like I started listening to
Okay.
podcasts instead, right? I was trying to like
Yeah.
be the angel.
Okay. Oh man.
And I found my animal getting very upset about that, because that was his
Yeah.
hour to go in there and like just cut loose, and so now I added that back to my life. It sounds so simple, but I either listen to really heavy rap or sometimes Metallica type music, just heavy workout music.
Mhm.
And my animal's he loves me, if I just give him that 1 hour a day,
Finally.
you know?
Especially if you lifting heavy, man. I don't know.
Yes.
If you're doing some squats or like real like heavy bench, you need that. I need that
Yes.
bass. I need something bumping.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes. Yes. Exactly.
I need it. I need it.
Exactly.
Now, if we're doing some like band workout or I'm doing like light kettlebells, I can probably listen to like a podcast doing some
Yeah.
flow work. But
Yeah.
man, if we throwing up some big stacks,
Yes.
I need a
Exactly.
Gucci Mane. No. I need some Young
Yeah.
Thug. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
It's funny, like I haven't talked about this a lot, but on the topic of rap music, it's like it's poetry about what the real world is today, oftentimes. Now I know there's all kinds of rap music. I'm generalizing here, but I was thinking about this the other day. Is there's this constant near constant reference in rap music to money, right? They're always talking about money, get my money, take it. And it's not, I don't
There's a
think
reason for that, but go ahead.
it's a deeper sense, actually. Like what is it? Cash rules everything around me.
Mm-hmm.
That's the fucking observation right there. Like, yes, it does.
Cream, get the money.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think there's such a powerful cultural force there, and like clearly rap and the Black community has seeped into all other cultures in the world through that. And I think that I don't know. I was just thinking, like, if there'd be some way to benefit from the momentum of that cultural movement, but with a deeper understanding of money. Like, I don't want people to stop at like, oh, I just do it for the dollars. It's like, what are the dollars though? Like, let's look one layer deeper than that, and hopefully help people to see that you're engaged, you're vitalizing a system of slavery by just focusing on dollars. Like, I guess what I'm trying to say, I'd love to hear some rap about Bitcoin and sovereignty,
Yeah, but
disrupting
actually make it
dollar.
cool. We talk about it all the time. All right, I know we're like finishing up, but you just hit like a very amazing point of bringing culture, pop culture, just Black culture, anything cool, fresh culture to
Yes,
Bitcoin, right?
yes,
And just have that immersed with each other. And as you were saying, with hip hop, yes, it's very flamboyant and like money, women, twerking,
yes,
all that, but that comes from a place of not having. So
yes,
when you live for generations where you weren't able to make it out, and finally you have a talent or you have a skill to get you out of that social class,
right,
all you think about, even working up to that point, is like, I need to find a way to get money. I need to find a way to,
yes,
make sure my
yes,
mom got her lights on and I have food
yes,
on the table. So that those are like the only thoughts that's occupying your mind. You don't have the time to sit back and philosophize and
right,
think about your
right, right,
higher self or
yes,
self actualization. This is just pure
yes,
survival.
yeah,
So when you have that point of money, okay, you get there, you're like, well, this is all I was working for. Like, this is what I know, this is what I talk about. But if we can somehow, because we got the voice, I'm saying we, but but like we have the voice of the youth. It doesn't matter, Black,
yes,
white, whatever.
exactly,
Like, our dances is the world's dances. Our
yes,
slang is the world's slang. It
yes,
originates from us.
yes,
So if we can take that consciousness and, as you were saying, flip that script of love of the money, but know what money actually is, all right,
right,
and how
yes,
it's being used and utilized against us, and know the alternatives that's in place, and but make it in a fresh way. You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah,
not
yeah,
make it
yeah, yeah.
corny. That's the
I
thing.
know
That's the thing.
it's an
Yeah.
art, clearly.
A lot of people are into cryptocurrency. A lot of people are into Bitcoin from the hip hop community, but
Yes,
it's still looked at as something like, okay, this is kind
kind
of
of
nerdy.
fringe.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
fringe,
yeah,
cypherpunk
yeah.
thing. But yeah.
Well, no, I just think that I guess the visual I have is if whoever, insert big name rapper here, if Drake came out with some song that was like F the dollar, like look at, here's
Everybody,
the truth about money, the truth about money, like, some song like that, it would just blow people's fucking mind. You could make Bitcoin. They just need, you're to your point, we have to de-nerdify Bitcoin a little bit, you know?
yeah.
And not selfish reasons. It's like, no, this is the cultural vein you want to tap into because these are the people being victimized, right? And it's not, again, not just Black people. It's like all of the value systems that are influenced by the Black community would benefit from something like that, which is everyone, as you said. So it's like
Yeah.
it's the mainstream, I think, to tap into. But I haven't figured out how to rap super smooth yet. So I'm just
No, but we talk about all the time about culture, and it's funny that you said that you had a low agreeableness, and that is kind of like the sentiment of the Bitcoin, community.
Mhm.
Like, have fun staying poor. I
Yeah,
like I tell people, if you looked a Black woman in the face and said, "Have fun staying poor,"
Yeah, it's fucking
Lord
awful.
have I
Yeah, fucking awful.
bless your soul, because anything that happens after
Yeah,
that, like you don't,
yeah,
it's like a way of communication. It's a way of communicating to people. And of course, like the community that started with, like the cypherpunks and the people who were programmers, software developers, and then it kind of moved to, hedge funds and Wall Street. So
yes,
who are the people who mainly populate those areas? It's going to be white dudes, you know what I'm saying?
that's
It's
right.
going to be,
That's right.
but if we want this to be adopted on a global level, right, it needs to have a global perspective, right?
Yes,
It can't just
yes,
be this small group of silo sort of thinking,
yes,
because everybody has different perspectives. And like people like we was talking about the different philosophies, right?
yes.
It's so many different ways that you can flavor the chicken.
That's
You know
right.
what I'm
That's
saying?
right. Yeah.
As long as the core is that chicken, is that
Yes.
poultry, is cool. Whether you
Yes.
put paprika on it, fry
That's
it
a
up,
good
grill
way
it,
to put it.
it's still chicken at the end of the day.
And yes, and toxic chicken was necessary for a while to get Bitcoin out of the ground, to get the seed to germinate. But I agree with you. I think the Bitcoin is so much bigger than any individual culture. It needs it needs to be cross cultural,
Right.
effectively. And I think that's what I'm trying to say is that synchronization between rap music, which has become the most cross cultural thing in the world, in my opinion. I could be
Yeah.
wrong. I don't have numbers to back it up, but my experience, that's the slipstream into which Bitcoin needs to flow to really help people understand what's wrong. Like everyone knows something's wrong.
They feel it. Yeah.
So few people can put their finger on it.
Right.
And I think it would really shock a lot of people if you're like, no, it is the money. Like, I know you think you need more money, but it is the actual character and nature of the money that's creating all this. So,
All right, man. Well, I'm waiting for that mixtape. When it drops, just give me a feature, a quick little feature. Robert Breedlove, you just always deliver. You always deliver, man. I appreciate the time.
thanks, man.
So if anybody wants to look up more of your work or what you do, how can they find you?
I'm on Twitter at Breedlove22, BREEDLOVE 22. Links to most of my stuff there. You can also find me on YouTube under my name, and then our website is whatismoneypodcast.com.
Yeah, and I'll tell people, start with the Michael Saylor What Is Money series. Jeff Booth is a great one. Those two, that's where I first got kicked off on with your podcast, and it's amazing. It's amazing.
Awesome,
so if you so you guys have the time to do a 6-7 hour rip.
That's worse than that, actually. I think Sailor's 14 hours and Booth is 11 maybe, but yeah, it's I'm going for the long form content, clearly. But people have loved it,
because it gives you a chance to go through the nuance, of
That's
things.
right.
So thank you so much, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Thank you for having me.